Welcome, and we begin with Canada's push to stop the latest U.S. tariff threat. Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc is back in Washington this week for more meetings alongside Chief Trade Negotiator Janice Charette. It comes on the heels of meetings last week with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. CBC's Kate McKenna has been following this now. She joins me. Thank you very much for joining us, Kate. What do we know about the meetings?
Well, this was a bit of a surprise trip from Minister LeBlanc. It was telegraphed by his office this morning that he was heading down for trade-related engagements. We do know a little bit more about what he's expecting to do there. A source speaking on background said that he is expected to meet with senators, both Republican and Democrat, as well as industry leaders in the United States. We know that that has been a strategy that this government and the previous government has taken to try and get industry leaders to put pressure on the Trump administration. But we're very curious who else he's going to be meeting with, because of course we know that last week he met with his counterpart, Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative. Will he be doing the same thing this week? We're not sure at this point. One kind of interesting tidbit was that the official speaking on background said that he flew down this morning, but they're not sure when he's flying back. So a sort of open-ended meeting. And of course, this comes as talks are intensifying. He was there last week. He called his discussion with Jamieson Greer comprehensive at that time. And we know that Canada's working on getting some sort of deal, maybe multiple deals, to try and get some sort of relief from the tariffs imposed by this administration.
One thing we've seen from the Carney government is that until the meeting happens, often they don't confirm that it's going to happen, because in this moment, sometimes the Trump administration can be unpredictable, and meetings that were supposed to happen don't necessarily happen, and then it's public. But it would be good to know if we can learn if there is going to be a meeting, or if there's plans for a meeting, or whether it's going to happen or not. But we are just 2 weeks away from those 50% tariffs coming into effect on certain Canadian goods. Where do things stand now?
Well, the pressure is on the negotiators to try and dissuade the American president and the Trump administration writ large from imposing those tariffs, which are set to take effect on August 19th and affect about 5% of Canadian exports, anything from hockey sticks to cement to alcohol. And so we know that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, said that he wanted to see those talks intensify. He said that he thought that this could be a window to form some sort of deal. But of course, there are other things that they're dealing with as well, trying to get the United States, convince them to renew CUSMA, the free trade agreement. There's also the sectoral tariffs on, aluminum, steel, auto, lumber, all of these things sort of part of a bigger basket that the Canadian government would like to see dealt with. But it's interesting. I mean, if he does meet with Jamieson Greer this week, that seems to imply there's some sort of momentum, because they did meet last week, but they're being very tight-lipped about what specifically is being discussed. In part because of the ongoing negotiations. But as you said, Katie, this is an unpredictable administration. I did kind of ask my sources today about the potential smoke tariffs, because we know that Donald Trump was threatening to impose more tariffs on Canada because of the wildfire smoke. And I was told actually that right now it's American smoke that is heading into Canada. And so that was sort of the rebuttal to that.
Yeah, you know what? On that point, I asked the White House today whether there was any update, because on Sunday, when Donald Trump was flying to D.C., he said that he had decided on some sort of the language that was put to him was a punishment for Canada for the wildfire smoke. He said he'd made up his mind, but didn't announce anything specific. White House didn't respond to that question today just yet. But we certainly will be following. I know you'll be asking your sources. I'll keep asking my sources. So thank you, Kate McKenna.
You're welcome.
All right. In order to get some reaction to this, more on what these intensified trade talks are signaling, I'm joined by Flavio Volpe, president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. Flavio, thanks for joining us. With both Minister LeBlanc and Janice Charette back in D.C., what do you make of it?
Well, you used the M word, momentum, and I think it's really important. We're in a different scenario than we were in 2018 and 19, when we had public renegotiation of chapter and verse of the NAFTA into the USMCA. Your discussion there with Kate was really to the point. This is a different administration with a different outlook on what public conversations are, and you use the word punishment in the wildfire smoke. There are real consequences that are new, that happen if you're negotiating in public. So I think that that the Prime Minister in this administration, the Prime Minister himself likes to negotiate more privately than his predecessor. The fact that he's there without a return ticket means what you think it means. It means sleeves are rolled up. And meeting with, when we talk about meeting with senators and congressional leaders, those are also really important people who, if we remind the viewers here that any new American tariff that's coming in on August 19th is farmers in the U.S. will pay more for seeds. It's not, Canada doesn't pay those. And so you're talking to senators and congressional leaders whose states have those clusters, whose states have filed this legal battle to try to get out of some of these new tariffs. You are bringing math and data to the table and hopefully finding some allies there.
What are you going to be specifically looking for if there are to be any signs of progress?
Look, we made a lot of progress in the fall on some very specific sectors, but most of the sectors that are carrying this trade war, steel and aluminum are carrying this trade war, lumber and automotive. Automotive was off that list. Certainly, you know, we're in constant contact with Janice and her team and Minister LeBlanc and his team. It's can we get back to that, to the progress that we got to last October, or do we have to work our way back there? Are those the math and the principles of what was a potential agreement, is that available to us now? I think that the answer, if you watch the American Posture and you listen to Jamieson Greer, who may work for the boss that we all don't like, but he seems to be really the guardian of math and data in that administration. There is, you see some of his public statements in those sectors. He says, you know, there is a North American system that needs to be fostered and protected. Now, they think that there should be some tariffs in there, and we don't, but it's real progress from we don't need anything from you, we don't want anything from you, don't come and see us.
You said something in that answer that stands out to me, that you're chatting in contact with, and it's not surprising, but that you're in contact with both Ms. Charette and Minister LeBlanc. What are they telling you?
Well, I think the context of those conversations is, let me keep you up to date on the consequence of the tariffs, for example, in automotive, and I represent the auto parts suppliers. The consequence of the tariffs on automakers over the last 15 months, how's it going over the last couple of months? What's the activity in that space? And also trying to proactively give them some scenario planning. So what would happen if, you know, the Americans proposed to the Mexicans, this is widely reported. What about a higher regional value content? What about an American specific content? What about the steel content? And then, you know, we try to run through for the negotiating teams. Well, that's what it would mean specifically in Burlington, Ontario, or what it would mean in Oshawa, Ontario, Vaudreuil, Quebec. And you know, do what we did through TPP negotiations and CETA negotiations and NAFTA negotiations and this one here, which is, well, I'll get you an answer real straight on exactly what it means for those specific companies in those towns, and then help them balance it off humbly against other priorities in the economy. We saw how the Chinese managed to play off one industry off another when they put tariffs on canola and fisheries products. You know, we're all, you know, there's a lot of people supporting the government. The government's taken, I think, a really economy-wide look at this. Let's take our personal hats on. Let's put our Canada hats on, and give them dispassionate advice. And remember that Canada has to come out of this hole, and we can figure out the rest of it after.
We're still waiting to get details on the meetings that Dom LeBlanc and Janice Charette are going to have. But if, in fact, there is another meeting with Jamieson Greer or even Howard Lutnick, you know, it would be a change because the Americans haven't carved out a lot of time for Canada. There was a meeting last week, and for meetings if there is another meeting back-to-back weeks, that would be unusual. I'm wondering, does that indicate to you that Canada may have offered something up, or Canada has done something in order to get the Americans' attention in this way?
No, look, American stakeholders, industry groups, trade groups, academics, bipartisan stakeholder voices have all been saying, what are you doing to the Canadian relationship with the U.S. and that we have a stake in it. Our return is on investment depends on a good, smooth relationship. So it also may mean that the administration is getting a lot of noise now from American stakeholders, and so. Look, Jameson Greer and USTR have been very open and willing to meet on a regular basis. They meet with Canadian stakeholders that come down, including our group and lots of others. So I wouldn't read too much into, hey, look, Minister LeBlanc is there with Janice Charette, and we must have done something. Look, they got the marching orders from the boss, who said publicly, Prime Minister said, let's intensify these conversations. There are a lot of people who are working in Washington in the U.S. administration that would like to see a happy ending to this as well. It will come down to the boss's signature, but there is some real good faith from senior officials there who are hearing from their own American stakeholders, hey, listen, we can't get on the other side of this with a permanent problem with our biggest export market.
Here's one thing I will say, though, Flavio, to sort of counter that, is that there have been complaints about what's going on with the Trump administration's tariff policy, whether it's specifically targeting Canada. Businesses have pushed back, lawmakers have pushed back, there have been complaints. But broadly speaking, it hasn't done much to change the president's agenda. Is there any way that you can see that Canada can get out of this 50% tariff threat on certain goods without making more concessions?
Well, negotiations are about give and take on both sides. I think in the end, the results will matter, and we'll parse through it to see what we needed to give in order to get. I do know that our team is working under the same principles that we've had for a year and a half, which is don't get a bad deal. And, you know, look, I'm in the automotive business. We've been sitting under tariffs longer and heavier than just about anybody else's, but we're also trying and finding workarounds. Make sure you don't lock in permanent pain. And there has been some progress here. It is subtle, but those of us who study the Trump doctrine of negotiating, he turns up the volume as he gets closer to deals, and certainly there's a lot of evidence over the last couple of weeks that's possibly the case. In these new tariffs, you know, I've described it as not new objectives, but new tactics. Look, they wanted booze back on the shelves, and they weren't getting that offer. So they went out and said, well, we're going to tariff yours. It's a change of tactics, but it's the same objective. And you know, in dairy, they're hoping that we were going to concede something for no reason in the hopes to get back to the table. And we haven't done that. You can judge that any way you want, but they went out and put a whole bunch of tariffs on dairy products to force the conversation at the table. It's a game of poker. You know, you don't play with your cards pointing up, but we're at the table.
We got less than a minute left. Flavio, I know you do not have a crystal ball, but it's just over 2 weeks to go before the deadline of this new round of tariffs. Do you think it is possible, given, you know, you talk about the Trump doctrine of negotiation, do you think it is possible for Canada to escape this latest threat?
Yes. But I also know that if we don't have to, if the other side of escaping this threat costs too much, that we won't. And I think the government, if we get to that case, government should take the case to Canadians and say, hey, by the way, we didn't, but this is why, this is what the price was. Find a way to do it. But I think Canadians have turned in this latest set of threats, this wildfire stuff, turned really positively, I think, towards Ottawa to say, look, if you explain to us, we really don't appreciate how cavalier the White House has been with our future. But I'm positive. I think we're going to get there. And if we don't get there, we're going to get close enough that we're going to see the other thing that potentially see the other thing that Donald Trump likes to do, which is extend deadlines.
Flavio Volpe, let's check in and chat again with you anytime soon. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Flavio Volpe, the president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. Canada's top trade negotiators are back in Washington this week, a surprise visit after high-level meetings just last week. It comes as U.S. President Donald Trump's new 50% tariffs on some Canadian goods are set to go into effect on August 19th. Canadian industry says it's remaining optimistic about progress in those talks.
The fact that he's there without a return ticket means what you think it means. It means sleeves are rolled up. They think that there should be some tariffs in there, and we don't. But it's real progress from we don't need anything from you. We don't want anything from you. Don't come and see us.
All right, joining me now is the Power Panel. Stevie O'Brien is a former Chief of Staff to Liberal cabinet ministers. Nathan Cullen is a former NDP MP and BC NDP minister. And here with me in studio is Kate Harrison. She is a Conservative political analyst. Stevie, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of the fact that both LeBlanc and Charette are back in D.C.?
I think that they are doing what they've said they're going to be doing all along. Conversations are going. You can sort of disregard some of the performative aspects of Trump's negotiating style and some of the rhetoric and all of the cliffhangers and say, no, the Canadian government is working on this, and they are they're there. They're ready to intensify negotiations. They're ready to put in the work. And I think what we're looking for here is not a quick deal, it's the right deal. So while maybe things are intensifying a little bit with this new looming deadline, the latest in these sort of Trump cliffhangers, I think what we want is for our negotiators to not just sign anything, but to sign something that protects CUSMA into the future.
Kate, what do you make that they're back already in D.C. already again?
I think you'll find cross-partisan consensus that it's a good thing to be at the table. We can probably quibble over whether or not that should have started kind of before that looming deadline, I think as Stevie put it, was put into place. But the deadline's here. We have a date to work towards, and it can't be understated how important it is that those conversations go well. They're about $20 billion worth of goods that could be impacted by the 50% tariff. And that's, yes, in part paid by American consumers, but a lot of exporters of goods, of course, absorb those costs, which means then Canadians are paying them. They also, there's also an impact in terms of businesses losing out to American competitors. And so the stakes are enormously high. I do think that given how important this is to the national economy, we deserve some more transparency from the government. Nobody's looking right now for term sheets between countries. But at the same time, we seem to only really get updates from whenever Jameson Greer takes the screen on U.S. media and not so much from the Canadian side. And so I do think, given the Prime Minister campaigned on this, they could be more forthcoming with where we currently sit and what's actually on the table.
Nathan, what do you make of the fact that the top negotiators are there in this moment? And do you, that point where we're not getting information about what is going on. And I think Kate makes a point about, okay, we're not looking for the term sheets, but there isn't a lot of information about where things are, how things are going. And, this is the thing that Mark Carney was elected on how he's going to negotiate and deal with Donald Trump. What do you make of, I just asked you like 7 questions, but what do you make of all of that?
That's the best for a former politician, because then that means we get to pick which question we want to answer.
Yeah, well, this is a different forum than that. But for the purposes of this wonderful conversation we're going to have here on the Power Panel, what do you make of any of that or all of that?
It's good to be there, good to be in the room, et cetera, et cetera. I guess there's an asterisk to all of this. Is what does a deal with Donald Trump mean when he consecutively breaks the deals that he himself negotiates? He's very distracted. He's stuck in a forever war of his own making, which he promised not to do. He's going to get crushed in 90 days in the midterms, according to all the prediction markets and all the bettors. That's got to preoccupy him a bit, unless he can cheat his way out of that. And he broke the pool. And that's preoccupying him as well, because the guy's all about monuments and legacies, and he's wrecking them, and he might not get his Arc de Trump built in time before he has lost some of the control. What's good is that I think our negotiators are talking to senators, to business leaders. The unions have recently come on side saying, get a deal. Those are all positive forces in Canada's favor. But again, that heavy asterisk has to be placed on whatever trade deal you acquire with this particular president might not always be worth the paper that it's written on. And my interest is around Canadian families, businesses, workers that are impacted by this. I think if you were to be critical of the government, there hasn't been really enough anticipation if that 50% tariff does come in 15 days' time. What are we going to do about all those industries that are going to be impacted and the workers that could be affected? That's not a comfortable conversation. You don't want to predict failure, but it is also as likely as any outcome of what happens in the next couple of weeks, given the state of the U.S. president.
One thing that we can talk about in the next block, because we're going to chat about tariffs in this moment, one thing that I think I want to put on the radar for Canadians, and I know that the history would put it that the Democrats would have a very strong turnout in the midterms, the way that the polls are suggesting it. A number of us in the DC Bureau, after doing many trips out into Republican country, I am not convinced that the Democrats are going to do as well in the midterms, particularly in the House. I don't think that, just based on when we go out and we go talk to people, I know it's very anecdotal. I'm not necessarily convinced that the historic trends that would normally happen in this moment, because it's just the way that Republicans have branded Democrats and the way it's resonated in small communities, or even like, anyway, we can talk about this in the second block of the Power Panel, but I'm not...
See, Katie, I baited you.
There you go.
I talked about midterms.
I can't stop.
Debate.
I can't
We're
stop.
talking about tariffs.
I know, we're talking about tariffs, but it does have to, tariffs and the midterms are interconnected, so we can all tie it back into that.
Yes, they are.
Stevie, you know, if there is going to be a meeting with Jameson Greer, who is in charge of the tariff file, you know, he's in charge of the tariff file. If we do get that second sort of meeting within 2 weeks, do you think that, you know, in order to do that, will Canada have to make some concessions? Is there any sort of way that, you know, Canada can get out of this sort of new tariff threat without making some kind of concessions?
I think so. I think here it's very difficult to negotiate a trade agreement with a president that has said he doesn't care for the agreement and he doesn't care if it's renewed and it's not important to him. So I would really caution Canada against giving anything up at the table. Be very thoughtful with any concessions, because right now, as we've seen with the current threatened wave of tariffs, they're even applying to things that would be otherwise exempt under CUSMA. So I don't know how much you can trust in whatever is being negotiated, so don't give everything away. I think what Carney's doing, and he is being transparent about, is he's focusing on what we can control, bringing down internal barriers to trade, making a stronger Canada through investments in infrastructure and energy, and diversifying trade. It is not a fast fix. It is not going to be an instant fix, and we're not going to, there are definitely going to be sectors that are still going to feel pain if the tariffs remain. But I think it is what can be controlled, and it is what we can do to, in the face of this sort of completely unpredictable, destabilizing American president.
Kate, what is the perspective, from the Conservatives in this moment about the concessions Canada has made already during, Prime Minister Mark Carney's time in office? And is there concerns that, the concessions that have been made so far haven't really resulted in the results Canadians had been hoping for? And, concern that more concessions could, result in the same non-movement?
Well, it's not a concern that's held by Conservatives. It's a statement of fact. The concessions that Canada has made around DST, around retaliatory tariffs, did not result in the sectoral tariffs being lessened, and now we have new tariffs. We have more tariffs today than we did at the start of this trade dispute. So it's not just Conservatives that are concerned by this. It is a fact that the concessions that have been made by the government have not resulted in any net benefit for Canada throughout this trade discussion and negotiation. I think we have to look at the word concession carefully. Part of the problem I see right now in terms of the rhetoric around the trade dispute is that we are looking at this as exclusively a zero-sum game. It is only possible that if CUSMA is held to the current standard, that anything else is a loss. I think the U.S. administration has been pretty clear. It's been clear throughout their other trade deals that is probably not on the table. So what is, and what kind of positive leverage can Canada bring to the table? That's something that the Conservatives have talked a lot about. Energy should be on the table. We should be looking at a security and an economic pact with the U.S. That involves energy and critical minerals. Obviously, we have a shared interest in national defense and the protection of the North. And so it is not just, tallying up how many losses Canada may have as a result of this negotiation. And I think most Canadians don't want to root against Canada in that way. but we're not hearing the government talk about what positive benefits might actually emerge from a renewed agreement. And I don't think that because the president may or may not choose to observe whatever is new is a reason not to pursue that, because the longer we don't pursue that and have stability, the longer we jeopardize future investment in Canada, and we keep having this, this threat hanging over our industry. So I think we need to be looking at this with a little more, frankly, optimism of what we can bring to the table, as opposed to what negative retaliation might exist, considering we're 1/10 the economic size of the U.S.
Nathan, we got 30 seconds in this block of the power panel. What are you watching for any sort of possible signs of momentum?
Momentum would be great. Concessions would be insane. We've already made the concessions, as Kate said, and as Steve rightly pointed out, be very careful. It's the definition of insanity to do the same thing expecting a different result. We didn't get anything from them last time. It's weird because the government does have to argue trying to achieve status quo, just trying to get back to normal. And to Kate's point, not being able to talk about all the great things that could come from a beneficial trade agreement, because we're dealing with this constant attack, not just in trade, but on our very sovereignty. So tough bar for Dominic to get to, because you're just fighting to get to normal. And that actually would be an achievement. It's not very exciting, but it would be an achievement.